You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's guest, who was a suggestion from his own son who wanted to hear his father's story told here on the Hazard Ground. What an amazing thing to do. We always remind you guys to go to our website, hazardground.com, fill out the contact us form, give us any guest suggestions that you have. I think it's awesome that, there's somebody out there who wants their dad to share their story. So we'll get to that in coming up just a moment, but we'll continue with our normal announcements. Please follow us on the social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground and Hazard Ground Podcast. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. That helps us as well, guys. We talk about the 5-star Apple reviews that you guys always leave us, and we want you to leave those as well. I'll get to that in a minute, but the YouTube channel continues to grow. We need your help. So smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, check out all the shows there. You can see all of our guests face-to-face that we've recently been doing here over the past year plus on our YouTube channel. So follow us there as well. Told you about the Apple reviews. Again, leave us a review. I just got another one this week that it's always nice to hear people's thoughts on the show and why they love it. But please continue to leave Apple reviews. The more of these we get, Apple puts us at the top of the algorithm. And we continue to try to be one of the most notable podcasts out there. We can do it with your help. So go to Apple or wherever you get your reviews for the podcast. Please leave us the best rating you can. Tell us why you love the show. We certainly appreciate it. And our promotion with Amazon. I am tracking this every day. I see how many clicks you guys give us on the website. So we appreciate it. Whatever Amazon shopping you're going to do, go to hazardground.com first. The Amazon button is at the bottom of the homepage. Click on it right there. It'll redirect you to Amazon. You can do all of your normal Amazon shopping, whatever you want to buy, whatever you need. It will give you, we will get a percentage of what you guys spend, and then we'll donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities and organizations featured here on this show. It's the easiest way you can help veterans, charities, and veterans just by going to hazardground.com first and then clicking on that Amazon button to do your Amazon shopping. Works for your smartphone as well, redirects you to the app. So if you save all your credit card information on the app, it's really, really helpful there as well. So again, continue to support the show. We certainly appreciate it. We've had some great momentum in some of the guests that we've released recently, so we want to keep that going, and we thank you guys for all the support as always. All right, this week's guest spent a total of 24 years in the Army between active duty and the Guard. Also time as a military technician. For those of you who are active Guard Reserve AGR, you kind of are very familiar with the technician program. Retired as a first sergeant out of the Army. He was a combat medic and a flight medic. Had multiple deployments, including one to Afghanistan. Also spent time in his career doing drug interdiction, forest fires, high altitude missions, natural disasters like Katrina, earthquakes, floods, everything you can imagine, and recently retired as a firefighter in the state of California. He is Gary Volkman, joining us here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Gary, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Mark. How you doing?
Great. Again, big thanks to your son, Camden, who reached out to me to get you on the show. I think that's awesome. We thank him for being a big fan of the show. But listen, one of the things, and I've said this for years now, one of the things that's been amazing about this show that was sort of like an unintended benefit that I never thought of when I started it was the idea of chronicling history, that somewhere along the line, somebody's going to ask their dad, hey, what did you do in the war? Somebody's asked their mom, what did you do in the war? And they could say, hey, go listen to the Hazard Ground where I did an episode, and then we can talk about it. Right. I mean, because it kind of just saves a lot of the explaining where you've already explained it once. So, and kids love podcasts. So, but it's in perpetuity, right? I mean, like, as long as there's an internet, the Hazard Ground will be around somewhere, inshallah, as we say. And your story will be there forever for Camden to hear, and hopefully Camden's kids to hear, your grandkids. And I don't know if he has them ready or not, but I think that's pretty awesome.
It is kind of exciting. I do have 5 sons. Camden is number 4. So the older 2, they grew up really with me in the military, so they totally understand all the deployments and being called up and being away and all that kind of stuff. The younger 3 more remember probably me being a firefighter paramedic. So they don't really have the same connection as the other 2. All the boys are very close, but it's just an age thing, how they came about. So Cam absolutely loves to hear the military stuff. and it's been kind of cool. I've been actually getting back with a good group of friends of mine who were all deployed with me most of the time, and we've been getting back together, and it's been a lot of fun to get back and talk about stuff again and share stories, and just help us get past some of the things that not everybody gets past.
No, 100%. Any of your sons interested in joining the military?
It's kind of crazy. I always figured one of them would, but no.
Hey, well,
yeah, it's been I don't know, maybe from listening to some of the stories, they've changed their minds. I do have one that became a firefighter. He's actually working for Sacramento right now, and my oldest is an electrician. Cam is a construction worker, and the other two are still kind of finding their way. So,
well, listen, it's I don't know. I mean, I think about my own kids. I mean, they're a long way from being 18 and old enough to join the military. But, I'm sure it's a conversation at some point in time they'll have with me. I'm sure your kids have had it with you, at least the idea of, hey, is this something I want to pursue?
I'm a big supporter of it. I've helped many young men and women consider it as an option. I do teach on the side also, so I always use it as it's not for everybody, but for those that do want to serve or think they can, there isn't too many jobs out there that you couldn't find in the military in one branch or another.
No, that is true. Well, from encouraging others to yourself, how did you get your start in the Army?
My uncle was a Vietnam vet, and he worked as a technician for the California National Guard at the Army Aviation Support Facility in Sacramento. And growing up, I knew that he wore a uniform every day, and I just thought he had the coolest job in the world. And so at 17, still in high school, I got my parents' permission, and I signed up and joined the Guard. Went off to boot camp right after graduating high school, went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, did my time there, and then went to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and became a Huey and a 58 mechanic.
How did you know you wanted to be in aviation?
That's what my uncle did. He worked in Hueys.
When you signed up, what year was this?
1983.
Okay, so there wasn't really, in theory, there wasn't really much going on in the world. We know after the fact there was, but America was at a time of relative peace for the most part. Was combat ever anything that was in your mind?
I think it's always I think it's in everybody's mind if they're joining the military. You think that, yeah, this opportunity could come or could present itself someday. Like you said, I did join during the Cold War, and there really wasn't a whole lot going on. And for the first good section of my career, I felt like nothing's going to happen while I'm in.
Right. Why the Guard as opposed to active duty? Just out of curiosity, was it just because your uncle did the same thing?
I think it was because I was 17 and just not too sure about what I wanted to do exactly. I knew I wanted to do what he was doing. I figured I could always go active duty if I wanted to. So I joined the Guard, and that's the whole thing. If you hate it, it's 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year, which is a big joke. And then
it is, yeah.
And if you wanted to go active duty, you just sign up and go. And so that was my intention. After coming home from AIT, I ended up on a 9-month deployment to Los Angeles for the Summer Olympic Games.
Oh, really?
So I got a lot of experience down there working on aircraft and got my first taste of flying around. And I lived in a elementary school on a cot, and it was a very interesting deployment, but I got to feel what I believe was kind of a continuation of my active duty part. And then I came home and went out, got a real job, and started to do the Guard thing, 1 weekend a month kind of a deal, trying to get some experience. And that's kind of where it left off.
So when do you decide to get into the technician program where you're doing this thing full time?
after I went to work for a furniture company, I was moving furniture and fixing stuff. I decided I'm going to go active duty. Um, this is going to sound silly, but that's about when I met my wife, or future wife. And so I discovered the technician program and thought I would work towards getting the experience to do that. So I started really working on aircraft quite a bit, getting enough experience so that I could qualify for a technician job.
I mean, it's interesting for those who don't know, maybe some of the civilian folks listening, the technician program, and even AGR, Title 10 AGR is one of the better kept secrets in the military. It's not so much secret anymore because the Guard has been thrust into a much bigger role than ever before. But if you're Title 10 AGR, you essentially are an active duty soldier. You work full time for the Guard every single day. You have all the benefits of active duty and everything else. It doesn't happen though. They don't get to pick you up and move you every 3 years from Fort Campbell to Fort Riley to Fort Lewis to wherever.
Absolutely.
Work in the state that you're in.
Yeah, I was working on an active duty Air Force base, Mather in Sacramento, California. I wore a uniform every day. I had a rank. When you were on with everybody else there, they expected you to act as a soldier, as anybody would be expected to act. We had PX privileges and all that kind of stuff. There was really no real differentiation that I saw between being an active duty guy and being a civilian, other than maybe who my paycheck came from.
Right. And the technician program, technically, you're a state employee who wears the uniform every day as part of your job. So, I mean, you technically work for the state, not the federal government. And Guard people work for the state as well, but you get a regular military LES, leave and earning statement LES. But so the technician program is a little bit different. It's just a couple of quirks to it here and there. Whereas you still get paid for drill weekends. If you're AGR, you don't get paid for drill weekends because you get your active duty salaries. So a couple things here and there, but it really is one of those nicer benefits that can provide for somebody who wants to build a family, build a home, live in a certain area, not have to uproot every 2 or 3 years and can still make a very long career out of it. Yeah,
absolutely. One thing I don't know if you touched on that, but you do have to maintain a position in the Guard that's compatible with your job.
Yes.
And so, if you lose your Guard status, you lose your full-time job.
Yeah, that's the slight hiccup in the system there. The two are forever linked. So you get into this technician program. What year do you start this? I'm just trying to lead up to deployment time.
I think I was officially on at the facility in '86.
Right. Just out of curiosity, when the Gulf War kicks off in '91, did anybody think of your age that you guys were going to be part of this whole thing and go anywhere?
Yeah, actually, my unit did get called up.
Really?
So they went and backfilled for active duty unit that went over. The 507th left out of Texas, and the California Guard went and covered Texas and Honduras.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually lost a helicopter in Honduras, lost 3 crew members.
Wow. Kind of a headline you never heard about or read about, too. Wow.
Yeah. Well, back then it was a big deal to us.
Yeah, no, again, and I don't want to gloss over too much of, the early part of your career, but how much actual training are you getting as a crew chief and a flight medic, or in the pre-9/11 world, I should say? What's the operational tempo like? Because, listen, I know the Guard, but most of my Guard time has been spent in a post-9/11 world. So, there's always something to do. There was always some place we were going. I don't know the Guard when we weren't in 2 wars.
Yeah, it was completely different. When I first joined, it was like a flying club. Most of them were guys that got out of the Vietnam War and came home, had to keep their technician jobs. So it was a lot more fun, more like MASH on the TV show. Not so serious, not too military oriented. Yeah, we went to the field, but it was more about just flying and having fun and drinking beer after drill, that kind of stuff. Very little hardcore training, not much real training towards combat. And then as the world began to change and the Guard became to make up around 25% of the aviation assets in the active duty world, the training, the aircraft, the technology, all the stuff that came along with it allowed us to really up the tempo. That's where I think there was a huge shift in between the Guard and the active duty. We started getting the same equipment. Instead of flying on 30-year-old helicopters, we were getting the Blackhawks that were being phased out, which still was a pretty big deal to the Guard. And now people had to go back, transition courses. You've got electronic cockpits, you've got advanced electronic warfare gear in the aircrafts and stuff. So there was a lot of training that really stepped up. And I think that's where my unit really excelled. There was a group of us. I don't want to take lead, but I was a full-time guy, so I was able to make a lot of changes to really start to take this serious and start to put together realistic training and getting the guys up to speed for what we all considered someday would be a deployment.
I mean, did you ever think, though, that deployment would happen? I mean, you signed up in 1983, so you get through 17 years plus of not much going on. Did you start to feel like, hey, this is just the way it's going to go, and that opportunity is never going to, that bell's never going to ring, that opportunity is never going to come?
I did, absolutely felt that way. The Guard, this Guard unit in California was so involved in other things. I think I was getting my thrill seeking through all the other stuff that we were doing. We had a pretty active, our state is got a lot of problems. Everything from forest fires to floods to earthquakes to rescues. Like I said, the counter narcotic stuff. So we were pretty involved in a lot of different facets that were going on in the training world. So to me, those were all like mini deployments. I mean, when I look back on it now, and I think my deployment to Bosnia compared to my longtime career as a Guard guy, no, there's no comparison to 280 days away from home. But I did routinely work 2 to 3 months at a time away from home throughout every year of my career. So I did on the average of 5 annual training periods at 2 to 4 week periods. And then that doesn't include all the schools and everything else that we have to go to.
I am curious about some of the other Guard missions. And again, we'll get to Bosnia and Afghanistan, but in all this time, and a lot of people forget this now because the Guard has been so thrust into, a different role now than it was. But the primary mission of the Guard, for those who don't know, is homeland response and state response, whether that's natural disasters, floods, fires, hurricanes, whatever it may be. Now we do more civil disturbance and riots because, we're a convenient toy to have. That's a whole different conversation, but neither here nor there. Did any of that actually come up prior to, you going to Bosnia in 99?
Well, I'm not sure what your question is.
How often were you guys involved? I can't remember, any massive, wildfires in California that you might've been part of, or earthquakes. I can remember the earthquake in 89, but that wasn't near you, was it? Oh, that was the Bay Area. You're in Sacramento, so it was close.
Yeah, so we had the World Series one, right? That was the one that's fairly close. Yeah, we went over to an Air Force base that's closer to the Bay Area, and pretty much staged most of there was plenty of resources to help handle that one. Got involved in the Northridge earthquake down in LA area. I don't remember the year on that one. Yeah, getting old. We also deployed down there for that. The Rodney King riots after.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's another one in California. Yeah, yeah.
So the Guard got involved in that one too.
What was that? What was that mission for you? Was it just barricading traffic and blocking streets and things of that nature?
I mean, that's what most of the ground units would do,
Right.
because we were an aviation asset. I mean, a lot of times we would get deployed, but not really used because of being a medevac unit. There's not a lot of people getting medevaced out. I mean, there was plenty of ground ambulances and fire department stuff that could do most of that stuff. So it was mostly just moving people around by aircraft.
Right.
If roads were inaccessible
or taking some VIPs on a nice little sightseeing tour above the ground.
There's always plenty of that. There's always people that want to see what's going on, not be involved in it too. So.
Gotcha. All right. So you have all that going on. When we get to Bosnia, when do you find out that you're going, and what are you thinking? What are you hearing leading up to it? And what are you being told?
That was a tough time back then. That was during the Clinton years. And I remember them talking a lot about, United Nations missions and what we were being deployed as, peacekeeping, and we're going to give everybody a blue beret, and we're not going to be U.S. soldiers anymore. We're going to be some sort of world police, and it was all that kind of craziness that was going on. And I don't think anybody really knew what the actual answer was. And so, there was a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of unknowns. I think when we started seeing the new equipment arriving, new to us, Blackhawks and getting people off to schools that they've been waiting, sometimes months, even years to get to. All of a sudden, these school doors are opening up, and people are able to get trained, and we're getting pilots from the outside that were coming in because they already had experience. Then you kind of know you're going. They're setting you up to go. So there was a lot of unknowns. It was exciting, but at the same time, it was a little scary, not really knowing what was going on over there. And I'll be honest.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, prior to that, I don't even think I knew where Bosnia was.
Right. Okay, but so your mission as a medevac guy is pretty consistent no matter where you go, right? I mean, there's no apprehension about the mission itself, whether it's Bosnia, whether it's the Gulf War or whatever. Like, medevacs are medevacs. So I guess there's no real worry about what you're doing per se. It's just a question of where you're going. But this is like your first real taste of an actual deployment. Did it seem any different to you at all?
I think just that unknown of that there's a real possibility that there's somebody there trying to do you harm. It's like as a firefighter paramedic, I don't think about pulling in and wondering whether there's going to be a secondary device or somebody trying to shoot us because we're responding. Where back then it was different. Somebody shoots at combat troops, we fly in and pick them up and take them to the hospital. And it's pretty, I want to say, controlled. It's not quite as chaotic as I envisioned it would be. There's always the danger. I think over there, having never dealt with a landmine in my life, and now all of a sudden we've got a country that's got literally millions and millions of landmines, to the point where you can't even walk off the wooden pathway or the concrete pathway because there's so many landmines. There's a real good chance you'll lose a limb. So we did see a fair amount of that kind of stuff, even though most of the real fighting had been over.
I mean, so you actually have a medevac flight in Bosnia?
Yeah, we did fly a few missions. I couldn't tell you the actual numbers. I want to say it was someplace in the 100 range.
Well, that's significant.
I mean, over 9 months? No, I think that's pretty light.
Okay.
It just depends on.
It's like 10, a month. It's one every 3 days.
Okay, that would be a really slow house in a fire department.
Okay, but yeah, I
hear what
guess.
you're
Oh,
saying.
I mean, it just I don't want to minimize, the effect of it. I guess, we don't know. God, the historical recount of Bosnia and what went on is so not there. It's so vague, right? Like we fought that war from 30,000 feet. We didn't really commit anything on the ground. Everything was done through the air. Whatever support we provided was done through the air. But like you said, there was still a certain amount of things going on the ground that, probably hasn't been spoken about enough.
Yeah, there was a great deal of, because I think because we hadn't been to war in a very long time, and because we were still kind of doing this joint multinational kind of crazy setup that's on in the world where, France has a section and we have a section and Russia has a section, or whoever, and it switches around that you have all these entities trying to make a name for themselves, and yet nobody wants any risk for anybody. And so it becomes very challenging for we fell under a regular Army hospital unit that did not understand aviation at all and would keep us from flying because of weather. I mean, nobody judges weather better than pilots. We have limits of what we can do and what we can't do, and then to have a medical service officer tell you that you can't fly because, well, there's a little bit of fog. We have an all-weather aircraft. I mean, we've got some great pilots. We've got some dual instrument rated people that, as long as we have takeoff ability, we can do our things. I know that we deployed a couple of times. I say deploy, but went on missions. It was a pretty serious vehicle accident on one of the highways in Bosnia. A bus was involved down an embankment. Many people injured. We got on scene of that one within, 20 minutes from launch time, and they would not allow us to land. They wanted the civilian authorities to get involved and handle that. And here we have two medics on board. We're flying overhead. We could literally land and really make a difference in somebody's life, and yet you've got politics that get involved and don't let you do what you're supposed to, what you've trained your whole life to do.
Yeah, well, that happens more often than not. When you are leaving Bosnia, do you feel like, okay, I finally got a chance to do what I wanted to do as a flight medic? I finally get this, the opportunity to put all these skills to use, and I'm almost at the finish line now. I'm 18 years in, 19 years, whatever it may be. Let's call it a career. Was any of that in your mind?
Well, I wouldn't say it the way you're saying it.
Okay. How would you say?
First off, I was not a flight medic then. I was a crew chief still.
Okay.
So I ran the rescue equipment, ran the hoist, took care of the aircraft, and my partners, the guys that I was flying with regularly, were all guard guys, firefighter paramedics, and they were all trying to convince me to become a firefighter paramedic when I got home, leave my technician job, and, as they would say, go get a real job. And thought I had the personality for it. So in my downtime, I was taking medical classes. I was becoming an EMT. I was taking advanced cardiac life support. I was taking all these classes while I was over there, and discovered that I really kind of dug being a medic. Being a mechanic is cool too, but being a mechanic on people has its own challenges.
Sure.
And Bosnia took a terrible toll on the Guard. It was first long time deployment, 270 days away from home for a guy that's normally 1 week in a month kind of a thing, was pretty hard. I think we lost 25% of the company when we came home. People had just ETS'd or got out.
Due to non-retention.
Yeah, non-retention.
Which is crazy, because statistically and typically, retention is higher after deployments, not lower.
Yeah, but it was so, I hate to say mismanaged, but that's really quite correct. Both from Big Army and from Cow Guard.
Mismanaged in what aspect? Was it just bad leadership, or was it, the whole concept of what you were doing?
I would say a large focus of it would have been leadership. Yeah, can't get into too deep of specifics on that, but felt as though everybody was so ill prepared for.
That's, again, I would ask why you can't get into specifics, but I would say I think for the first real time in that generation of the Guard's leaders, they actually had to do military stuff full time and be leaders, and they never had that sort of experience.
I think you just nailed it. I think guys that had never been active duty before, their whole career was in the Guard, became a platoon sergeant or a company commander, had never really commanded anybody that, where you had to make a real tough decision. You might have to choose somebody out for coming back late for lunch or something, but now things are a little bit more serious, and the lack of control that was going on back then was poor at best.
Yeah, no, again, and I can see it. And I mean, I was active duty first before I went into the Guard, and it was invaluable. I can remember a quick little anecdotal story here. I had left active duty, and I had gone to a range for the first time with members from the Guard, and I watched, I think it was an E8 and an E7 at the end, because when you burn up ammo, you have to get rid of all the ammo. And for those who are wondering why we have to do that in the Guard, if you don't use all the ammo, like they give you less the next year.
Yes.
It's like a budget thing. So everybody fires up all their ammo, even if there aren't enough people there to qualify. Anyway, I watched the C7 and the C8 just stand there and act like they were Rambo on the range, just, guns on each side, just pumping rounds down range, complete safety violations, just a bad example to set in front of soldiers and everything. And I went absolutely ballistic. I went bonkers on the range. I threw my Kevlar. I was going nuts, like just screaming, because I thought it was real Mickey Mouse shit that was going on. The idea that everybody stood around and watched it, nobody stopped it, to me was, and my company commander, I was a senior first lieutenant at the time. My company commander chewed me out for it. And I'm like, this is nuts. You're yelling at the wrong dude. Go yell at those guys for about a dozen safety violations, just setting an overall bad example in front of the entire unit, just because they thought it was funny at the time. And that's the different sort of corporate culture of the active duty and the Guard. And now the Guard is a much different corporate culture because they've been thrust into an active duty role more often than not.
Yeah, and what you're saying is 100% my experience. Also, when I first came in, that joke side of things was, oh, this is a club. This is not military. We get to wear a uniform, but yeah, we can do pretty much whatever we want. And then later on, you've got active duty who can be so overbearing that, this is stupid. We can't even think without, on our own 2 feet. And then, so that was our experience. And on that first deployment, is that active duty looked at the Guard as a bunch of yahoos that didn't know what they were doing. And what we discovered as a mechanic is that down on the flight line, taking care of these aircraft, we had technicians that had been working on these advanced aircraft now for several years in a hangar as technicians that really knew the aircraft inside and out. And then on the active duty side, you've got a 20-year-old kid that finished AIT, about an hour before he got in country, and they don't know how to do their job. And we ended up bailing them out constantly, but yet we couldn't be trusted because we were Guard guys. And right. So there's both sides of that coin. I would put our Guard paramedics against any active duty unit anytime now.
Right.
Back 30 years ago, no. But the guys now, I mean, these are guys that are working every single day, either on an ambulance or in a fire department, and they're doing some incredible stuff.
So beyond all the differences between the Guard and active duty, you get back from Bosnia, the unit is down, people and everything else. Are you thinking that you're going to change course at this point in time? Or and the other parallel part of this, you talked about, doing this medic thing. Did you see anything over there in Bosnia that sort of solidified that was the right path for you?
I mean, because I was working in the hospital on my spare time, I got to do some pretty cool stuff. I mean, I did one of the few rescues that were done there was done by myself and my flight partner. We evac'd a guy who had stepped on a landmine out of an active line minefield. That was a combat hoist from about 250 feet of cable. That's a long ways. So, putting somebody on that cable and lowering them into a minefield and having to package a patient and bring them up without killing anybody else. That was pretty exciting stuff. That's not your everyday kind of a call. So after Bosnia, though, I was pretty disgruntled too. And I wanted out. I wanted away from the technician program. I wanted to get out and do something different with my life. And I was really pursuing the medic thing, trying to consider whether I wanted to maybe leave it and start a new career as a fireman or whatever. I actually thought I wanted to be a cop. So.
Oh, okay. What made you stay in? Was it just sort of biding time or what?
Well, I was married and had 4 kids at that time. I think I had 4 still. And, so I got a wife and a house and kids to take care of and all that kind of stuff. So leaving a career at, in my late 30s, looking for a new job is, it would be very challenging.
Sure. And then all of a sudden 9/11 happens. So, does anything solidify you staying in prior to 9/11 or other than what you had just mentioned, or did you think you were just counting your clock down?
No, I think our program, a couple of years after Bosnia, we were in a kind of a rebuilding phase, just kind of getting people back in, getting new people. We really started to put a heavy emphasis on training. I became the lead trainer at the facility, so I was flying every day and training people every day. And I got a great group of guys that came in to work for me as instructors, and everybody had a like mind. And so we all really started to put forth just a ton of effort into training people the way we thought that they should be trained, so that we didn't fall into another Bosnia situation. So our rescues became, we just started doing a lot more of them. We started telling people, we started kind of advertising of what our capabilities were, which were getting us more calls, starting to let the sheriff's departments, who are normally in charge of search and rescues, of what our capabilities were, and then getting them to contact the right agencies to get us out on maybe a search and rescue, versus waiting until it's a body recovery, which is normally how it happens. And once we started to smooth that out and started to have some real rescues, then it became something that, we're having a problem on Mount Shasta. We'll just call those 126 guys and they'll come down and fly up there and get them. And that became kind of a regular thing, probably once a month.
So where are you on 9/11?
9/11, I was actually tying my boots, getting ready to go to work, and I had the TV on and watched the second plane hit the tower. I remember watching the tower was on fire, and then watched the second plane come in after I got to work, and I knew. I mean, just in your head, you're just knowing, this world's going to shit, and we're going to get involved in this one. And so actually that day, because everybody was so unsure of what was going on, we prepped up as many birds as we could, not knowing if it was going to hit the West Coast too. And, just got ready, started calling people up and making sure that we had medics available and pilots available and crew chiefs. And making sure all of our gear was staged and ready to go, and told my wife I'll be home when I'm when I'm home. Obviously nothing continued on after that day, but there was still that air of oh my God, what's going to happen, for quite a few months. That it dragged on for a while there.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, then as things kind of just went on from there, our training just intensified, just knowing that it's not going to be long before they spool up somebody. They just got to figure out who we're after.
Right. So you don't ultimately end up in Afghanistan until 2003. Were you anticipating it to take that long?
Well, I don't think anybody ended up there for about the first 10 months or so.
Sure.
SF went in, late. Well, it was already, so that happened in September of 01. So it was already late 2002, and we went in January of 03. So we were the third group in, the OEF 3, and replaced an active duty unit that had been there. So, yeah, it was kind of a big deal for a guard unit to come in and take over from an active duty unit on a full deployment like that.
Now, again, I said earlier that, hey, medevac is medevac. It doesn't really, there's not much worry about the mission itself. But compare it, think back, you're heading into Afghanistan to do this versus you had just been in Bosnia to do it a couple of years ago. Is your mind frame any different? Is your mindset any different doing this in Afghanistan, or is it just because of the unknown of the actual territory?
I think the unknown's always there. There's always that little bit of fear in the background of how bad is this? Bosnia, you didn't hear about anybody getting shot or IEDs trying to take out, secondary devices or whatever. It was much more of a peacekeeping mission, where this was more of a combat deployment. The units that were there were going door to door, kicking in doors. People were getting injured. It's certainly not a World War II type scenario, but death is happening. And without somebody else being there to help take care of some of these problems, the death rate would have been higher.
What were you guys told prior to arriving in Afghanistan?
About the mission?
Yeah.
Well, first off, I was not in the position to be a first sergeant. I was in the flight platoon. I was just a trainer, and our first sergeant was one of those retired in place Vietnam vets, and wasn't ready for another deployment. And I got asked to take them as the acting first sergeant. And I jumped at the chance. I was excited about it. So as crazy as that sounds, yeah, I couldn't wait to go. To me, I had trained, I was in 18 years by then. And to me, I was all about, I've trained my whole life to do this job and never really got to do it. And now it's like, put me in, coach. I want to show you what I can do. And so we went very shorthanded. We took 6 aircraft and 81 people, and to cover an entire country with 81 people is a pretty big task. There's 4 crew members per aircraft, and then there's maintenance and there's operations, and there's very little support. No extra people, no overhead. And we were scattered. So we had 3 birds in Kandahar and 3 birds in Bagram. And then we each gave up 1 bird to cover an FOB in the middle of the country to kind of split the flight distance. So we kind of 2 and 2.
Did this seem like it was overwhelming in any size, way, shape, or form?
That's hard to say. I mean, I was overwhelmed with the task. just because I had not really been in that role before.
Right.
I know how to manage, but I've never actually had to do it in a situation like that. And dealing with like the personal problems, I knew in my head that I'm solid. I know what I'm doing. I know that my buddy is solid. His wife's taken care of. Everything's cool. But then maybe you have, other people in your unit who's, got a child custody issue or financial problems or the other things that first sergeants and company commanders have to deal with. And those personal issues become way more involved than your everyday combat mission.
So when you land on ground there in Afghanistan, it's January of 2003. Give me your initial thoughts and reactions. I mean, I know we're not in Kansas anymore, or in your case, California. But was there a sense that like any of this was, I mean, again, the word overwhelming?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of our gear hadn't come in.
Well, and I'll say this much. When you land in Kandahar, man, and you land at the airport there and you look around and you just do a 360 and there is mountains on all sides of you. It feels like you're in one big valley. It's one continuous mountain chain that runs around you. You're kind of like looking around going, yeah, this place is not like anything you'll ever see anywhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got there at nighttime, so yeah, so you can't see anything. They shuffle us off, get to a place where we can bed down for a couple of hours, and they put us into some kind of transient tents, and we unroll our stuff and go to bed and get up, crack of morning and step out of the tent, and like you said, there's here, oh my gosh, there's mountains all around us, and at the end of the runway is a mountain that's 18,000 feet tall. I mean, that's 4,000 feet taller than Shasta here in California. And it's massive. It's just beautiful to look at. And there's snow on the ground and the streets are muddy. And it was a little different. Here we are in green. Everybody else is in brown. And, that was kind of shocking. I was really mad about that. We're the only ones in black boots and green uniforms. And
boy, do we look ridiculous.
Yes, we do. And so, that's goes back to that. Oh, I guess the guard's here, get out your funny hats and your pink flamingos to set around the tent, and
yeah. And thus was born the term RFI for those in the guard, the Rapid Fielding Initiative.
And that's pretty much what happened. I found a supply sergeant that really wanted to go for a helicopter ride and was able to get uniforms for everybody. Found a lot of trading going on.
Hey, listen, beg, borrow, steal, right? Any good logistician. So, yeah. Do you remember your first medevac flight in Afghanistan?
Absolutely. So actually our first day, so we got up that day, we went, got some chow, came back, starting to get some, we're going to do right seat ride kind of a thing, where you're getting your hand off from the guys that you're replacing. And within the first hours of being there was an explosion at the front gate. The medevac guys jumped into the back of a Hummer and a couple of my medics jumped on and everybody flew out to the front gate. And it was a couple of kids that were turning in unexploded ordnance and it blew up in their faces right at the front gate. So started off with to us, it wasn't anything different than an IED, but it was literally kids trying to turn in explosives and, getting blown apart. Another thing that we did not prepare for was pediatrics. We weren't expecting any kids. This is a combat zone. We're expecting combat soldiers and enemy combatants, not a bunch of civilians and a bunch of family members and little kids and babies and all that. So we were not really, not that our guys aren't prepared to take care of those kids, but we didn't have the equipment. Your average Army medic doesn't carry a whole bunch of pediatric stuff on a medevac bird. That's not our normal clientele. So yeah, so my first mission, there was a child who had fallen off of a roof in the far northern reaches of Afghanistan, and they launched us to go get him. Um, there was like you said, a huge mountain range on the way there that we had to navigate. They don't normally let medevac guys fly anywhere without an escort. So you needed an Apache escort because of them trying to shoot everybody down. That became a lesson that we didn't understand. Although I was aviation prior, I didn't understand that an Apache flies much slower than a Black Hawk. And so, when you're on a fun run with your, or a platoon run or a company run, and you always put the slowest guys up front, and all the runners are in the back, and they're all just complaining because they can't stretch their legs out. It's the same kind of a thing. The Black Hawk wants to fly, and it wants to fly 150 knots. And you've got this Apache with a whole bunch of stuff sticking out of it, rockets and guns and everything else, and it can't fly past about 120. We feel the urgency to get there because we got somebody that needs help, and they're going balls to the wall, but we literally could.
Their balls aren't as big or as fast. Let me ask you one thing, though. So you're going to get this kid, this Afghan kid who fell off a roof. Was there any part of you that's like, the hell are we doing that? Like, we're supposed to be, like, why are we saving Afghan children? Like, look, in the big picture, I get, we are there to help everybody, but right, and we shouldn't have anybody suffer. But there's initially part of me that I'm on ground. This war is, 15 months old, and we have American troops in combat nonstop, and you're sending me on a gun run to go get a child who fell off a roof who's not even an American child.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the stuff that people just don't understand about winning the hearts and minds of the people that you're there for. I mean, even the Green Berets train train the locals to help overthrow whatever faction is going on.
But there's a combat related effect to that, right? Hearts and minds. I get it. I mean, I was in Iraq. Hearts and minds. I get it. I just, I'm trying to wonder if anybody else around you was looking at you going, or you were even thinking, the hell are we doing this for?
Yeah, I think that does come in. I think a lot of times it's you got your Navy SEAL out there who's living in an FOB all by himself. He's trying to make a difference where he's at, and this child gets brought to him, and he's limited because of where he's at. He's probably overtrained for taking care of this person, but he doesn't have the facilities, and so the only way to move throughout the country is by air. And I think that's kind of what it came down to. Did we haul a lot of civilians? Yeah, a fair amount, but most of them were because of combat related injuries.
Right.
This one, not so much, but maybe he was the child of somebody that was helping them. So who knows? I mean, it's hard to say.
Okay. I assume this one goes smoothly as planned.
Yeah, not at all. So we got to the mountains, which, everybody has rules that they have to follow, and aviation's pretty strict on their rules. Aircraft are not supposed to fly above 14,000 feet without supplemental O2. The mountains that we're flying over are taller than that by a lot. So, I know that at one point I saw 19,000 feet on an altimeter. In a Black Hawk, that's a pretty big deal. Anyways, we ended up getting to the child. He had a depressed skull fracture, so he was in really bad shape, and he was not breathing on his own. So myself, as a crew chief, I was breathing for the child. I was using a bag valve mask and doing his airway, while my medic partner was doing everything else, IVs and making sure that he was going to survive this flight over the mountains. As you can imagine, controlling an airway at altitude is difficult. Anyways, I breathed for that kid for, a 45-minute ride back home. We're low on fuel, going to run out of gas. Had to get into our our 20-minute reserve. These are things that aren't normally broken either. Ditched our Apache at one point because we could just fly so much faster and could get to where we needed to go. Got in trouble for that one. Landed, and all I could see while I was breathing for this kid was the face of my fourth kid. He was about the same size and about the same build, and that's the one that I don't want to say haunts me, but I still see that kid. I still see his face. But I was right there with him for a solid hour. Yeah, he didn't make it. So,
I mean, you get your first real taste of this whole experience. Is there a part of you that thinks, hey, if this is what this is going to be like, man, I don't know if I'm going to handle this?
Actually, I think I took it better than I thought I was going to. With my being surrounded by my friends who work in that field regularly, I could debrief with them, and we could kind of do a critical incident stress debriefing and kind of tell me, hey, this is sometimes the way it works. And I'd been studying kind of the medical side of things for quite some time, and so I'm not unrealistic that not everybody's going to make it. Yeah. So
now you had told me you flew over. I mean, in the 9 months you were there, hundreds of missions, right?
About 800.
I mean, so 100 in Bosnia, 800 in the same amount of time in Afghanistan. Carry the 2. Yeah, that's a lot more.
Yeah.
So now you're going out. What was 3 days a month before? Now it's almost every day.
Oh yeah.
What? I'm curious as to when it's that much and it's that rapid and it's that fast, is there any part of you that's thinking, one, like, oh my God, this is untenable, but two, like, how do we survive this thing? Because and again, I assume not everybody is an American who has been injured, right? I mean, some of these are, like you said, other scenarios that present themselves.
I mean, yeah, there's the local nationals, there's enemy combatants, there's Americans. Obviously, we care much more for our brothers in arms than we do everybody else. That sounds terrible, but that's reality. These are my brothers.
I don't know that it does. I think there's a priority to everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're going to do absolutely everything that we can to save an American life. And that's, yeah, if we had the choice between two calls, I mean, that's a no-brainer. I think the question I got asked the most when I got home was, how could you pick up a member of Al-Qaeda and try to get them medical help? It's a difficult thing to explain. I think for me, sometimes I think to myself, we're going to do what we can for them because they're humans. Mm-hmm. And if they can suffer a whole lot longer for what they've done for their sins, that's not up to me. That's up to a higher power. So, later on, I learned more about the way I felt about things and my own personal beliefs in God that will help me answer those questions easier.
I want to hear that, but I would respond to everybody this way. Dead guys don't talk. They can't give information.
Absolutely.
If Al-Qaeda alive as a prisoner is better and more valuable to us than him dead. I mean,
absolutely.
The sad part of, let me rephrase the sad part. I don't even want to go there. The stories you hear where a gunman then turns the gun on himself after killing 3 other people, whatever it may be. We don't know the motive. Why? Because that guy's dead. So that's the first thing I would say. The alive Al-Qaeda guy probably is more useful to us than they are dead. That's how and why we would pick them up.
Yeah, for sure. I actually have kind of a funny story that, the other government agencies that work inside of combat zones, we did pick up a couple of high value targets that were injured severely, medevac them in, came in at night, and do you know what a Russian hip is? A helicopter.
No.
It's a Russian helicopter. The other government agencies and when the Soviet Union was chased out of Afghanistan, they left all kinds of old Soviet equipment. So some of these things were available to some of these other entities to use. And so a Russian helicopter came in and landed next to our helicopter, and a bunch of very heavily clad individuals in all black, and ski masks and whatnot, came over and said, yeah, we're going to take your patient. And in this world, wow, over here in California, that would never happen. An ambulance would never come to another ambulance and say, hey, we're going to take your patient in. That's just crazy. You have control of your patient and you're in charge of them. You've taken responsibility for them, And now we've got somebody that shows up with an MP5 around his chest and says, yeah, we're taking this guy. And we say, no, he needs to go to the hospital. He's in bad shape. And they say, no, he needs to go somewhere else right now. And they took our gurney or the litter and took it out of our helicopter and walked over to their helicopter and put him in there, and off they flew.
That's insane.
It was a shock to everybody that was there.
Did you have any information on this guy?
No, other than we knew that he was somebody that they were trying to get. And so he was heading off to be debriefed someplace. It wasn't where we were bringing him to the hospital. So
my guess is he probably didn't get the necessary medical care needed.
Yeah, it's hard to say. He got some. He got some prior to leaving us.
That is bonkers. Give me a couple other memorable medevac flights for good reasons or bad. Because look, I'm always curious when you get numb to seeing the things you're seeing. Like the medical field is always fascinating to me. I can't do it. But the idea that, this guy's missing a limb, or that the story you just happened. Oh, we lose another prisoner because the bad guy's got, it's a child who's injured because they stepped on an IED or something like that. At some point in time, your body and mind have to desensitize to all this stuff for you to continue to do your job. So, is there a point where you can remember that happening, where you just recognize and go, it just didn't even faze me at this point?
Boy, I don't know if I can answer that. Everybody's different.
Sure.
I think it does take a certain person to be a medic. Yeah. To be able to see that tragedy, the pain, the suffering, and be able to look past it and think, okay, I've got a job to do, and I'm not gonna focus on their getting personally involved with this person. I'm gonna focus on their medical care. I think that's how I deal with it. You see things that are, limbs that aren't in the position that they're supposed to be in or missing. You see things that are horrible for your average person to look at. And then, but your job is to stop the bleeding and get them off to further care. I mean, a paramedic doesn't really save anybody. We package them and control what's going on and get them to the hospital where, somebody who has a lot more medical training than a paramedic does can do the sewing on the inside to fix what we can't fix on the outside. And so, tragedy wise, I know of one story that probably would horrify a lot of people, but there was I'm going to call him Al-Qaeda person that was going to bury an IED outside of a forward operating base. And while he was burying this IED in the middle of the night, he needed to take a shit. So he steps off steps off the side of the road to do his business, and he craps either on a landmine or on his own mine, and it explodes. So it blows his feet off, his hands off, his pelvic section blew it into a lot of pieces, injured his face. I mean, really messed this guy up. But he was alive. So we medevaced him. They called for us. We get there, we medevaced him out. He made it to the hospital in Bagram. They did multiple surgeries and bandages on him. He basically became, as horrible as this sounds, a doormat. He's got no hands, no feet. His midsection, he's catheterized, not catheterized. He's got a colostomy bag. He's got, he's got no sexual organs anymore. His face is completely gone. So he's one big Band-Aid. And whether it was because of pain or just the psychosis of what's going on, he was constantly thrashing around in bed. His arms and legs were going everywhere, and he was falling out of bed fairly regularly. They had to tie him to his bed to keep him in there. And because he was Al Qaeda and because he was all bandaged up, we called him Taliban Tommy. So that was his name. I mean, that's what everybody called him. And so everybody knew was Taliban Tommy was knocking over stuff again or whatever, and I don't know if it was the nurses or who, but somebody stuck the stick of the American flag in his cast, in the end of his cast. So he had an American flag on each stub. And so as he's thrashing around, he's waving the American flag. So people would come and get a picture with Taliban Tommy waving the American flag, just as a kind of an FU to the people that did what they did to this country.
Sure.
The horrors of war. The average person would think, oh my God, that's the Americans did this. They're the most horrible people in the world. That's how people desensitize from all the horrific things that they see. How they can come to deal with and I guess accept it in their own heads.
Right. Do you know if Taliban Tommy survived beyond, that?
My guess would be probably not, or at least not for very long. There's no independent healthcare system in Afghanistan. There's no advanced care. There's no care homes. There's nobody there taking care of long-term medical problems. When they have problems, they just let them die, and their value of life is completely different than ours.
Right, 100%.
And so sometimes that's hard for people to understand. Children were being used, burned, cut, tortured, so that they would get medevaced because we wouldn't take them without a parent or guardian. So we would fly the child to the hospital. They would bring them into the hospital to work on the child, and the adult would disappear. They were passing notes to the Taliban that were in the wards that were being treated.
Wow.
So,
I mean, I'm not surprised by it. I just, it's.
I think it's just really shocking for a lot of people to even understand that you would hurt your own child in order to, pass a note to.
Well, in certain cases, it was, if you don't do it, we will. So, you know.
Absolutely.
A lot of threatening of good people by bad people who are Afghans to force them to do things, that they needed to do, which is, again, some of the most twisted form of civility you could ever imagine, or lack thereof for that matter. But, Afghanistan has survived that way for over 2,000 years, and nothing we were going to do in 18 months, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years was ever going to change that.
That's a fact.
So it was dead in the water from the beginning. It was a valiant effort, and I don't say that to underscore anything that any American service member did there. But in the grand scheme of things, the idea that we were going to inject democracy in 2 decades and undo 2,000 years of ass backwards thinking, it doesn't work like that. They got to want it more than you do. We had 2,000 years of ass backwards thinking from England to America. They settled in, let's just even do it this way. Wasn't even 2,000. It took them 150 years from settling in 1620 to 1770 for us to go, yeah, we've had enough of this crap. We're going to fight back. So if they were going at it for 2000, guess what? Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty set in their ways.
Yeah. We weren't changing minds, hearts and minds, right? Yeah, good call. Anyway, and look, I say that sarcastically, but I say it honestly, but I also say it with the benefit of hindsight being 2020. I mean, you know, you talk to Mark, who was heading into Iraq. I truly believe that it was the right thing to do. And, you know, we were there, we were the good guys, and we were doing the right thing the whole way. Like you get caught up in it a little bit because you love your country and you want to serve, and good, bad, or indifferent, you are almost, I don't want to say fooled, but you believe your own hype about.
I think you drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a very patriotic person, and no matter how much somebody can point out that we have faults or whatever, I don't care. I love this country. I've been to many other countries. I've been all over the world. I've seen third world countries. I'd put this one against anyone. I don't want to live anywhere but here.
Right.
So even with our faults, I'll take this one over any of the other ones. So, and I think most of the guys that went with me were the same way. You know, everybody volunteered to go. I didn't have to force anybody. My friend, who I flew with in Bosnia and also went with in Afghanistan, had already ETS'd out of the Guard. He was out. And when 9/11 hit, he called me and said, "Hey, you're going back, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I want in." And I said, I don't know if I can do that. I mean, I don't know if I can get you in. And he said, I want in. So tear up my paperwork. I'm coming back. And yeah, he came back in, got fully qualified in a very short amount of time, and deployed with me and flew with me as my medic, my partner, for most of the deployment. So yeah, these guys wanted to go. I mean, they wanted a piece of it. Was that whole put me in coach thing. Right. I think pretty much across the board.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's I think that part is a critical part of, you know, why we had the successes we did, because there generally was a feeling of that people believed that they were fighting for a good cause, and they wanted to do what was right, and they wanted to be part of something bigger. All that said, for you, you know, you have these experiences. Any other ones that are that stay with you sometimes that you think about more than others?
Yeah. So there was a gun battle that went on at one of the just outside of one of the forward bases. About 150 insurgents. They were running back and forth from Pakistan over to Afghanistan because they knew we couldn't pursue them, or they figured we couldn't pursue them. So they would come over and they would hit these very close FOBs and you know, basically shoot them up, launch a bunch of rockets and mortars and stuff in there, and then run back across the border. And so this was going on, and so this firefight happened, and you know, we hear that there's American servicemen that are down, and so the two birds that were from that FOB flew in and picked up patients and started flying them out. We launched immediately from Bagram. I think there was another ship that launched actually from Kandahar. And so anyways, everybody was kind of rushing to where this thing was going on. And again, it's mountainous terrains, it's windy, it's dusty, it's, you know, it's high desert, it's dangerous just flying, let alone being shot at. And so we get in there, the Apaches are being, you know, pursuing, they're out doing their thing. So there's no cover birds anymore. So they don't really want medevac going in and landing because there's still active shooting going on, but American servicemen need to come out. So guys are going in, they're landing, they're getting out, they're taking fire, they're rapidly packaging these patients, you know, putting them on aircraft and flying them out to the nearest FOB or advanced surgical, and then we'll fly them further back to Bagram. Well, when I got there, there was still some active shooting going on, but this American that had been shot, he had some significant internal injuries and needed to make it all the way back to the surgical, the people that might be able to save his life. And so I jumped on another bird with a friend of mine, Gene, and we took over his care and flew him home, or flew him back. Shortly after takeoff in the mountains, weather getting bad, he went into cardiac arrest. And so we began CPR on him. I know that I pushed on his chest for well over an hour, which is not very conducive to most CPRs. Yeah, watching it, not being able to stop the bleeding, doing IVs in flight, trying to do all this over mountainous terrain in bad weather. It takes a toll. You're back there trying to do everything you possibly can to save this person, and you land, and you're still you're putting forth every piece of strength and energy and knowledge that you have to try to save this person's life. And you get him in the back of the hospital, and the doc looks at him and goes, "Oh yeah, he's not going to make it," And they do continue care, so that they can get his paperwork in order, his promotions, his whatever else all situated, which is a wonderful thing that we do for their family. But he's never coming home. He's not coming home the way he left. So that one sticks with me. Pretty. That one sticks with me.
I mean, understandable. Obviously you remember the ones you lose more than the ones you save, right? For the most part.
Yeah. I think especially, when they hit close to home for some reason, but not all of them are that way.
Was there a part where you thought you were not going to be able to handle it? You were breaking it all?
I don't think so. Not while I was there.
It just overwhelmed you emotionally?
I'm sure there were times. I'm sure my friends might see it differently. In my own head, no. There were times I went out and sat on the HESCO and contemplated, what was going on, and tried to collect my own thoughts and thinking about family and whatever else. And am I really going to make it home from this? But I didn't really have a whole lot of those thoughts. I mean, it could happen, but I think I was so bent on doing more than my part. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Those thoughts that you had while you're sitting on that HESCO barrier, what were some of them beyond, am I going to make it home?
Well, just, my wife, I've got 5 kids at home. What kind of situation are they in? What are they thinking? Back then, and even still today, I'm sure there's plenty of places that we go that, we really shouldn't contact our families, or we couldn't contact our families. You can't really let them know what's going on. So they really don't know what you're seeing, what you're doing every day. So all they have is the news, which we know leaves a lot to be desired. To fill in the gap. Is my husband being shot at? Is my wife, out there being, with explosives around them, or those kinds of things that are going on, and so you just kind of wonder how much longer is this going to last. You don't really know. We didn't have an end date. What we thought was, our end date, or close to our end date, but people were being extended pretty regularly, so you don't know. You can't really say, hey, we'll be home in October or whatever.
When you find out that you're going home, what's your feeling?
Almost disappointment.
Why?
I think we felt like we finally got a handle on this, and we're doing the most good for these people here, and we didn't want to hand it off to anybody else for fear that they weren't going to be as good as us. I know that probably sounds lame, but I know what our guys are capable of. These are all paramedics. and the unit that's coming in behind them might not be all paramedics, might not be well trained, might be that goofy guard unit that never got trained up all the way. They got their birds, 8 months ago, not 5 years ago.
When you finally land back in the States, elation, relaxation, finally let your guard down. What are you thinking?
Oh, I think I had a few issues. There were some things that I didn't. I really hated being around crowds. That bothered me a lot. My kids. Well, my middle kid, when I left, he wasn't walking, and when I came home, he was walking, wearing shoes, talking. He wouldn't come to me, and that was really hard. Yeah. Every time there was something that was going on with the kids, they ran straight to mom instead of to dad. And that cut deep for me because I've always been really involved with my kids. And so that was hard.
Can imagine. I assume everything is okay with the kids now?
Yeah, actually, I get along great with all but one.
Oh, okay.
But I get along great with all of them. Yeah, actually, my relationship with all of them, now that they're more young adults, has actually gotten even better. I decided quite a few years ago that as I realized my boys are getting older and I'm getting older, I'm going to miss this time that I gave up all the time to be away in the guard or be on a deployment or be on whatever. And I missed out on a bunch of stuff. And so I kind of wanted to reconnect there. And so started doing more with them, building these memories. So that's been good. We've been hunting. So
when you get back, did you unlike the first deployment to Bosnia, were you somebody who was thinking of getting out after getting back, or you were trying to find a way to go back in?
I think after getting back and being home for a little while, everything was still kind of resetting. To know that half the unit went and the other half is probably going to go real soon, or at least within the next 2 years, we're probably going to go again, because that's kind of the way things were working. So there was that going on, but then after I got back, because we were pretty successful, both in our operational readiness ratings, we really outperformed. There's reasons for that, but we did a really good job, right? And so when we got home, there was some recognition that was going to happen. Like I was going to get promoted. Instead of being an acting first sergeant and doing it all for less pay, now they're going to finally give me my stripe. So they did that and gave me a different unit. And so I went further south in California and ran an AVIM, a maintenance company for a while. And then Iraq was going on. So most of my guys ended up going to Iraq. And the rest of the company ended up getting disbanded. And then I came back to medevac. So yeah, I guess I kind of thought that I would probably end up going again. And so everything was geared towards how can we make this deployment better than the last one? Right.
I'll ask you one more about, because I know you said you were part of Hurricane Katrina. What did you guys do there?
We had a pretty fancy helicopter, an HH-60. It's a $17 million helicopter that they made specifically for evacuation. And so we took these two birds and we flew them to Texas from California shortly after the hurricane and got involved in critical patient transfers. And we were there strictly for medical reasons, but ended up using the aircraft because they were available. And so did a lot of VIP overwatch looking, governor flights, those kinds of things. There's a lot of, the whole nation was looking at what was going on there.
When is your last helicopter flight before we get out?
Um,
I'm surprised you don't remember it more.
I don't. I remember my last flight in Afghanistan.
Okay.
That was important to me.
Why?
Before we wrapped up the birds and folded them and did all that stuff to bring them home, there was when the C-17s were coming in, since a lot of them were being used in Iraq, it was difficult to get out of Afghanistan that time frame. So instead of getting the birds that we were supposed to get, we got half of them. So I ended up splitting the unit and sending almost everybody home. 10 of us stayed behind with 2 aircraft, I think. So yeah, everybody else went home or started to head back, and we stayed there another almost about a month, a little over a month before we got out. So no mission. Our aircraft were folded. The new people that came in to take over for us, had the job, and so we were just kind of working out, eating, walking, work. It was kind of horrible. Well, after a short period of time, you're so used to working, 16, 17, 18 hours a day, every day for a year, you can't unwind like that.
Right.
And so we started going with them on missions and helping them on missions. And I was flying with their crews at night because their guys were tired. So I flew goggles. I took them out and did training flights with them. And our medics were still flying medevac missions, 2-man medevac missions. So we stayed engaged. We did go on an R&R. The 10 of us actually got to go to Qatar for a couple of days and come back home, which was kind of crazy. But
I mean, it's funny that you don't remember your actual last flight. I don't know. You seem like you would have committed that to memory. Just I guess because the question what I'm leading to is how did you know that you were going to be done?
Oh well, so I don't know the exact last flight in a 60 from my unit. I was already the first sergeant. I was still flying. I was probably the last first sergeant in the Army to be on flight status. And so, yeah, I mean, just to go for a ride around our normal flight training area, I didn't really give it a whole lot of thought. At the end, I knew I was done. And when I was getting out, I knew my last formation, and I went out and I talked to everybody and I saluted and walked away. I mean,
What'd you say?
What was that?
What did you say at that last formation?
Oh, just, I think I had an incredible career. I got to do a lot of really exciting things. I've been 18 different countries, I've been deployed all over the United States. I've got to attend, probably about 30 different schools. Some of them were absolutely fantastic. I got to do master marksman. I got to do Arctic survival. I got to do jungle survival. Just a host of things while I was in. So I had a fantastic career, and I knew I was going to miss it, and I do. Every time a helicopter flies by, I still have to go outside and look up at it. It's a big part of my life. So
that's pretty awesome. Outside of the flying aspect, what do you miss the most about the military?
I think the camaraderie, I think that's probably what you're going to hear everybody say, that being around your buddies and whether it's doing the mission or hanging out at the club afterwards or whatever, we just had such a great group of guys at the end there. There was probably like 10 or 12 of us that really made a big difference in the National Guard as a whole and also in the California Guard. Made a name. I'm pretty sure, I can't quote the exact numbers, but probably the last 10 honor graduates from the flight medic force are all people from the 126.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of a big deal. I mean, at least it was. It's bragging rights, right? I mean, it's still it's still pretty cool. The SIFI course, standardization and familiarization instructors course, that is now an Army course, got started when I was in. I was one of the first standardization instructors at a state level. They used to fly me all over the United States and train other units because they were trying to set a standard for everybody to meet. Not my standard, but the Army standard. And then they created a course for it. So there's a course today that people go to that I was involved in the very beginning of it. So, I mean, that's pretty cool stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, it also means you're just old. That's all.
Well, there's that too.
There's that too.
There's that.
It's funny. We talked to. Well, look. I mean, before I get to this question, you end up going to be a firefighter locally, and you just medically retired from that as well. So, was the firefighter thing just something that was sort of a continuation of military life, or was there another reason that you wanted it?
No, I was actually trying to become a cop, and yeah, I figured with all my shooting and medical stuff and military training that being a cop would be a no-brainer, and I could get through the testing, and just couldn't get selected. Tried to be CHP. There was a lot of affirmative action type stuff going on. They were really trying to fill a lot of roles, and I don't fault anybody for that. Later on, all my friends who were firefighters were all saying, "You're nuts, dude. Why do you want to be a cop?" I just thought it was my personality, and they said, "No, a fireman is your personality." And so I started looking into that a little bit. I became a paramedic, so and shortly thereafter, I became a fireman. And no regrets. I'm not looking back. I'm not sorry I didn't become a cop. Being a firefighter is also a great career. It wasn't my first choice. Being a military guy was my first choice. But there's things that are very similar. The camaraderie, we call it sitting around the oak. So the kitchen table is the oak table, and so we sit around there and tell our stories. And working on an ambulance is very similar to working as a flight crew. You know, you have your partner, and you don't know what you're going to show up to, and yet you're trying to do the most for the most. And you know, you train hard, and you train well to be available to somebody. And I guess that's why everybody loves a fireman. You know, you pass out stickers at the store, and it's not all just making chili and watching TV. It's, you know, we're there to be the coiled spring. You know, you're not always a combat soldier fighting the enemy. You train and you train and you train until that day presents itself. So for that, it's very similar.
We talked about your kids at the beginning of the show, and just, you know, the idea of the Hazard Ground itself, you know, being able to be a place where people can go hear your story. What do you want your kids to know about your military service?
I think that I don't have any regrets. My biggest regrets would be leaving my family or putting my career first. Right. And I did. I always put my career first and my family second. And later on in life, as I got older, I see where the mistakes were made for that. But I also think that's what made me successful in what I did. So, you know, I don't have any regrets for that. I do have regrets for, you know, some of the things that I may have missed with my children growing up, you know, the occasional birthday party or that kind of thing, you know, some family event, none that I can name, you know, off the top of my head, but
right.
But I wouldn't trade it. Knowing that I was serving my country and being able to provide the things that they can celebrate every single day is why I did it.
No, listen, I think it's a great reason. And I would add, at least from a spectator's perspective, you know, that you certainly showed a whole lot of patience and a whole lot of diligence towards your craft, because again, it's one of those things where you didn't start out as a medic. You started out as just a regular mechanic, and then you gradually started moving towards X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of weird how the escalation of the different things you did in your career matched up with the escalations of the things you were asked to do in your career. Those two sort of parallel paths were there. And I think it's always great to see that you were in the right place at the right time for your career to maximize your skill set, your talent level, and be the best sort of, as we say, quote, combat multiplier that you can be. And I think that, that's something at least that stands out for me. Like I said, as a spectator on the sidelines, hearing you tell this story, that, I think is pretty unique sometimes.
I think what I would want other veterans and people to know is, there's that. So you were Army also, right?
Mm-hmm. Still, yeah.
Okay, so there's plenty of people out there that don't understand the bantering between the Army and the Marines, or the Marines and the Navy, or or that the Coast Guard really isn't a military, or the Air Force doesn't really count, So there's all that, they don't understand that. But to me, and I have worked with every single one of them, there are great people in every single one of them. And I would put, I wouldn't want to take away from any one of them. And even though I may bash a Marine once in a while, I expect it back from them. Just in good natured,
sibling rivalry. That's all it is.
Yeah, sibling rivalry. And so, I think just that I would want people to know that not everybody gets to be a hammer. When I say the Navy SEALs are the best, or the Green Berets are the best, or Task Force 160th is the greatest, or the Air, or whoever, it doesn't really, it doesn't matter that who they're working for. They're all Americans, and we're all doing our job. But not everybody can be Delta. Not everybody can be a sniper. Everybody that you meet in the gun store today is a sniper, but not all of them are snipers.
Right. I say it this way, everybody has their piece of the pie. Some people's piece is bigger and more significant, but you don't get the whole pie without everybody's piece. And that's just,
yeah. I mean, that combat, that kid that's hauling around an M249, or a whatever, that machine gunner, that whatever, that he's got a specific job to do, and he can't do his job if I can't do mine. And even though I probably don't look the same at it as the finance guy, but none of us can do our job without supply. None of us can do our job without a truck driver. Yes, sometimes we need armor. Sometimes we need a helicopter. Sometimes we need a ship, but in the end, we're all fighting towards the same goal. And, I'm proud of America, and I'm proud of all of our troops. And I'm still here to serve if there's anything that needs to happen.
Yeah. Well, look, it was an amazing 24 years. You did and accomplished a lot. On top of that, you threw another 15, 18 years as a firefighter. So it's been a long 40 years of service, both to your city, state, country, and everything else. And I don't think anything can underscore that. I think that's the biggest part of it. I think people who have chosen a long life of service should be recognized, and your piece of the pie is, whether you see it as big or small, it's your piece of the pie. And it is significant, and it certainly impacted folks downrange, to say the least, from the stories that you've told, impacted you and your family. And so that piece of the pie always is special, right? Because it touched a lot of different people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it absolutely. It was an exciting career, both of them. And I always say there was three, but the technician side, the guard side, and the firefighting side. Yeah, I still do some volunteer work. I still teach on the side. I teach EMT school, and there's 3 volunteer departments around us, fire departments, that we're training the younger generation to help get out there. And yes, I still push the military once in a while to kids that don't know where they're heading yet, and hopefully somebody will pick up the rifle and run with it. But
keep downloading that information. It's useful, and I'm sure some of those students ask you about what went on in combat and everything else, and what you saw and what you did, and keep sharing those stories the same way you did here. And I hope that when your children watch this and they listen to this, and they hear you tell your stories, it sparks some very connective conversations between you all, because it's one of those things where we don't share enough of our experience because we think that people don't understand, they don't care, they don't have any relation to it. But in reality, that's what helps us deal with the things that we went through, is when we share it with others.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, we don't want to lose those stories.
No.
As I see our World War II vets diminishing down to nothing, all we're going to have is the books and the movies, which tend to lose information. That those firsthand accounts, those Pearl Harbor survivors that are still around that can still tell the story. Those are pretty much gone now. We've only got 2 left, I think. Because
of you, we'll always remember Taliban Tommy. So
I would hope so.
There is that. So he is now in global war on terror lore forever. Thanks to you. Well, again, I appreciate your time. I certainly loved hearing from you. Thank your son Camden for me again, for reaching out. I can't say it enough to our audience that it is so amazing to me when people suggest their family members, parents, whatever it may be, aunts, uncles, for this, because it just, we wouldn't know Gary's story without it. Right. And had he not reached out to me, you may have never done something like this. Nobody may have ever asked, and you may have never wanted to tell. But it goes back to that piece of the pie thing. We now know your piece of the pie and the impact that it had. So again, thank Camden for me. Thank you, and certainly appreciate you being here.
Will do. Thanks, Mark.
Gary Volkman, thank you for being part of the Hazard Ground.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.